first mentality, so that your conversation with the government should not be benefit first, it should be employment first. So for example, the IEP. So how many of you work on education issues? Do any of you work on education? Okay, great. So if you have a disability, you have an IEP, an individualized education plan. But the plans in many states do not include ever having a job. And so one of the most important things that you can do is through early intervention and through school all the way through is to change the IEP. And state by state, governors are putting out executive orders to say, look, we're not going to have an IEP anymore that says we're going to sit on a couch and collect benefits for 60, 80 years. We're going to have an IEP that says work first. How do you get people ready for that? There's a terrific program called Project Search. Please write this down, Project Search. And you're going to love this because you worked on the welfare reform. You can, if you have a disability, you can go to public school until you're 21. You can get services until you're 21. But let's imagine that you have an intellectual disability and you might never get beyond the 5th grade reading level or the 5th grade math level. And you are 18 years old. And you now have a couple more years that you can go to school. So what's the best use of those couple of years? So Project Search has married the needs of employers, and they're largely working with large hospitals. Hospitals are terrific employers for this because they have a cafeteria, they have grounds, they have janitorial needs, they have data needs, they have tons of kinds of jobs inside a hospital. And the school district will take a group of 9 or 10 young adults, they're 18, 19 years old, and they, instead of having the school bus bring them to the school, we're talking during the school day, they are going to the hospital and they meet with their homeroom teacher who is a job coach. And the job coach says, how did it go for you yesterday? What's your to-do list for today? And they've aligned them to compare their interests and their abilities with the needs of the employer. So over the course of the year, they're not learning how to count from 15 to 20, which they didn't learn how to do. They're in 3 different internships. Each of the 3 internships lasts for a couple of months, 3 months maybe. And they see, is this aligning with my interests and my abilities? And so there are these amazing stories that I have seen. Amazing stories. A man with autism that I saw at a hospital in New York, completely nonverbal, cannot read one word. He can follow a sign if it's a picture. And if you put the pictures in order of what needs to be done, the guy is so buff. He is just so strong, and he loves to build. And he was able to communicate that he loves to build. And he is in the workroom of the hospital, and he does upholstery. He changes all the chairs. So if something happens to a chair and it's time to redo it, he's the guy who does it. And you know what? That is actually a skilled job. It's a good job. It's not even a minimum wage job. That's a really good job for this young man who listens to music. He's having a great time down there, and he's got his instructions on the wall, and he's completely performing wonderfully. Saw another man who has extreme sensory disorder. Extreme. He cannot stand the touch of things on his body. And it goes from being a small disability to a huge disability. So sometimes he's okay with clothes, but sometimes, honest to goodness, he has to strip naked, which is really an unemployable problem, right? You can't have an employee strip naked. So they worked with this young man who has never been able to succeed in school, and they always thought he was not bright because he just couldn't stay in his courses because he had these issues. And when they understood what it was, they created, it was a big storage room, but they turned it into an office, and they gave him a laptop, and he's on this autism spectrum. He's like a genius with numbers, and he does finance at a very high level. So sometimes he's with a group of people and he's working with people, but when he feels like my sensory issues are just completely on overload, the guy just goes into this storage room where there's absolutely no windows, and there's a little sign that says, knock first, and wait for him to let you in, and then he waits until, it's time, and the guy's in there working naked. And you know what? He's an amazing worker, and he loves his job, and he's making a difference, and now they know that the guy is really, really smart, and they've been able to completely reorient his life. He's only something like 19 years old, and he went from a guy who's going to sit on a couch collecting money his entire life to a guy who's actually doing extremely high-level data work because somebody took the time to align his interests, his abilities with the needs of the employer. Again, it takes partners. You need an employer who's willing to do this. Hospitals are terrific employers for this. You need a school system that's willing to do it. You need the flexibility of some of those dollars to follow, because frankly right now the dollars are not flowing to this, because people say school is school. School is in a building. And you're only insured and you only get money when you're in the school building. And it doesn't count if you're in the hospital. You know, but these people, they're in this program for 1 year. There are now 2,500 young Americans with disabilities in this program around the country today, and the program has phenomenal rates of people being able to get jobs when they leave the program. Phenomenal success around the program. So you see these young people who are able to go straight into the workforce instead of straight into the welfare type system.
I was just going to say one of the centers for this Project Search program is at Virginia Commonwealth University. Representative Cantor might like to know that.
And actually, we're going to do some field trips to them, because there's one at NIH that's very successful. There's one at the Department of the Interior, and there's one at the Smithsonian right here on the mall. So there's 3 of them that are local here.
Do you know if any exist in Massachusetts?
Actually, I don't know, and I haven't met with Governor Duvall yet either. He wasn't at the NGA meetings, so I don't know yet.
I'll take a look. Thank you.
Questions?
Are there any in New York City?
So in New York, in Westchester, there's a tremendous program in New York at the hospital in Westchester. I'm working with Governor Cuomo on looking at what else can be done in New York, and they're putting together a whole team there. I don't want to go into any of the details because it's still in initial stages. But this is the sort of thing that can save a lot of tax money, and there's not a lot of things that you can do to make people's lives better that don't have an interest group coming with a big bucket that they want filled with cash. And so this is one of the very few things where you can actually save a lot of money, and so the governors seem incredibly interested in it, but frankly we haven't seen, for example, how many of you have on your websites, I assume that each of you on the Hill has a website with issues on your websites. I just invite you, when you go back to look at your website, to see if the word disability even occurs on your website in anything other than how you access your disability benefits. You know, whether your congressman or your senator has ever given a speech about every person of all ability should have an opportunity to achieve the American dream, or if they've ever written an op-ed, or if they've ever visited a site where this is going on. In Wisconsin, what Governor Walker is doing, and by the way, he's just rolled out 20 new project searches. He just announced in his State of the State 20 new project search sites that he's starting there. He actually went to visit and see it with his own eyes, and he was completely transformed because he actually saw that it really works. And so I encourage you to invite your members to actually visit and see, and that you guys come to see these sites here in the district.
Is there any in state of Utah?
Yes, Utah does. The governor of Utah does have some, and Utah has been pretty good on thinking about these issues. Yes. Actually, it's interesting. Maybe it's a side note, but the Mormon faith, which is particularly common in Utah compared to other states, has a tenet that every person is equal in the eyes of God. And the Mormon Church of all religions is the only faith group that I know of that has assigned for every congregation that there should be an inclusion officer to make sure that their religious events and experiences are inclusive of people with disabilities. You know, most people don't realize that when the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed, that all faith organizations were exempt from the law. And so some of the biggest discrimination in America happens inside faith organizations, and some of the worst offenders are faith organizations who are completely exempt from wheelchair ramps or hiring people with disabilities or letting people with disabilities go to Christian or Jewish schools. Some of the biggest discrimination in America is by faith-based organizations that are not yet inclusive. The Mormon Church has 24,000 congregations. Often they're lay-led with no paid person, but they are mandated globally that every single congregation should have somebody as an inclusion officer. Usually it's a volunteer whose job it is to use a policy that's called ATP. ATP is ask the person. In other words, you don't need to, if you want to be an inclusive employer or if you want to be an inclusive faith-based organization, you don't need to have the answer to how to include a blind person, a wheelchair user, a deaf person in your workplace. All you have to do is ATP, ask the person, what do you need and how can I help you be successful in this situation? And by and large, the self-advocate, the person with the disability can say to you, you know what, I need A, or I need B, or I need Z, and they can help you out. It's called ATP, very easy. Just ask the person, what can I do to make you able to be successful? I don't know where Congressman Sessions is, but maybe, can you ask where is Garrett there outside to find out what's going on?
He's right there.
Is Congressman Sessions on his way?
Yeah,
He's here and
he's on his way.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, great. All right. What are some other questions that you got? How can we help you?
What do you guys want to do about anything?
This may be an awkward suggestion, but this is a policy area I think that a lot of members are afraid of because the advocacy community can be ominous when you begin to touch issues dealing with how we structure our benefit programs and this kind of thing. If that was less threatening, you might see members being more willing to touch the issue in a way, and certainly when you are talking about a work-first approach, it's exactly what we did in welfare reform. And that was the approach that was tremendously successful, that left people much better off than they were before. But there is the risk that members, I think, perceive that if you get into a sensitive area like this and you begin to work on a work-first approach, that they might become the target of some of the advocacy groups.
You're a meanie who wants to take away my ability to
Exactly.
eat, and here I am in my
Exactly.
wheelchair and now I can't
Exactly.
eat because of you.
Exactly.
That is such a legitimate question to raise. I mean, my organization, Respectability, does not lobby. What we do is we say, let's showcase success. I think that Congressman Sessions is right outside the door. But he's got some great ideas, and he's been working on this, and I look forward to hearing him. Congressman, come on in.
Good, thank you.
We're so glad to have you.
Thank you very much. Great crowd today. Where do you want me to sit?
Actually, next to TJ Lavin would
That'd be great, thank you.
Good to see you, Congressman.
Sorry to be a minute late, but even when I was late for class, I went.
Thank
How you doing today?
Very well, how you doing?
Good.
We're thrilled to have you,
How are you?
Congressman.
Hi,
Nice to meet you.
you doing all right today? Yep. Good man, it's about to be cold. You put chains on there when you get in the snow and ice?
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet you're gonna do something like that.
You sit right there.
Oh, thank you. All right, yeah. Big day today.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, well, we can all get together and talk, and that's what's important about all of this.
It's a cold day out there.
It is
I
cold
don't really
day.
appreciate the cold.
Be from Texas.
From Vegas. It's not very good over there either.
Well, I get cold there too.
No, this is a different level of cold there.
You know, what you really want to say is, but thank God you're not from Atlanta.
This is-
You know, those poor guys. I find it utterly amazing. In Texas, we get about 4.5 inches of ice, and then about 1/4 inch of snow, and then everybody looks at us and says, those guys can't even drive on 1/4 inch of snow.
That's what they say about Vegas too.
I know, it's amazing.
They can't do nothing.
It's utterly
We can't even
amazing.
drive in the rain,
Yeah.
so.
You being here, look at that. That's a pretty good looking picture.
I think he's being pretty.
They need to do something about me. Listen, I'm delighted to be here today, and I want to thank everybody for doing this. The term respectability is a very important term. Everybody in here knows I have a son who's a Down syndrome man, and Alex is 20 years old, and he's a cool guy. And growing up, he did not know. He did not have as much self-awareness. And many times, most of us don't. We live our life and we try and do the things that we can and to our abilities. And we don't focus on those problems. I remember when Alex went to a school, and he was probably in kindergarten, and he spent his entire time with a couple guys who were in wheelchairs. And he came home and was worried about his classmates that couldn't walk. He didn't know that many of them could think through and do things he couldn't do. As Alex grew up, he learned the word can. And I don't care what you ask him, if you say, "What's the word, Alex?" He says, "The word is can." We found Boy Scouting. I'm an Eagle Scout. His grandfather's an Eagle Scout. His older brother's an Eagle Scout. And Alex would go to summer camp, and he would see fathers who would bring their sons in varying degrees that had some sort of what we term a disability. Scouting tried to accommodate them. They tried to accommodate wheelchairs. They tried to accommodate people who literally were without legs or arms or other limbs. But the one that struck him was the young man who was blind, who would walk up and down the trails without fear, doing the right thing. What struck me as a parent was the fathers that would show up, and there would be one at least every summer at the camp, who would show up with probably might be an autistic son whose child kind of fought with him. And the dad and the boy would be over trying to argue over going to swimming. Or perhaps a cerebral palsy child who would show up with his dad. And his dad would take him down to the swimming area, and his son would sit in a wheelchair. And his dad would describe what the boys were doing. Then they'd go to the nature area and deal with the spiders and snakes and wildlife. And then go to the Citizenship and the Nation Merit Badge, and maybe I was teaching it that day. At the end of the week, this young man and his dad, or the young man, would earn a merit badge. After several years, when the young man would turn 17, his dad would get a chance to wheel his son up and be an Eagle Scout. That was a dream for a dad. Maybe the son did not exactly understand everything that was going on. I was the father of a Down syndrome son, and he was cool. And when he jumped in the water, his nickname is Splash. Splash could beat every other little kid that was 11 years old. We go to canoeing, and it was not as easy. And Alex would get his merit badge. Alex could not really do the rifle and shotgun, but he tried his best. Respectability is a powerful word, because there are things that I'm not good at also. That a mathematician could walk in and make fun of me. Somebody that understands nature could walk in and make fun of me. But when you respect somebody's ability to do the very best with what they've got and to overcome challenges and to understand that what we're trying to do in Washington, D.C., state capitals, city halls across this country, is to allow every single person a chance to have, to the best of their ability, an equal chance on their own. I will tell you that I have seen people throughout my years that struggled, including one of them, Gene Stallings, for years with his disabled son, and he found a way. Johnny Stallings, a Down syndrome man, passed away a few years ago, but his dad felt strongly about trying to just find a way to be an advocate. I don't know the right way, except that if we talk about doing things that are good for people, if we respect some of the limitations that we have, some of the opportunities, then we will find better ways, and it will be a better world. The night my son was born, my dad said he will be the greatest thing ever born into this family. And we learned that every time you look and talk to Alex, you smile and give him the respect, and respect him for his abilities. He's a really cool guy. I don't know why God gave him to my wife and I, but he did. God is perfect. We're the ones that struggle with differences. But I'm a better person than my dad. I'm a better person because I don't just walk a mile in sandals. I feel it too. And for every one of you, either at this table or next to this table, and for the millions of others who do carry with you those things that God has made us be, I respect you, and I give thanks for you. To find others who have extreme talent and are handsome in our midst, for them to take time, it says a lot about them also. And I don't know what brings us all to the table, but I will tell you, if you're here today, you can do something about it. And that is talking well and good about people who want an even and a fair shot at what's out there. You'll find the language that is good. I find children, mostly, and young people who are worried about their life and fret over lots of things. I do an intern program every summer where we have about 175 kids from Dallas, Texas who learn about it. And I do my part by taking about 15 minutes and talking with them, not only about people that don't have things, poor people, people without, but also about full utilization of their abilities that they do have. And one of the strongest statements that I give with them is this, is I tell them the story about Alex. I tell them that Alex would change places with anybody in the room. That they know they've got problems, but they're the lucky ones, there's always somebody that's got a worse problem. And I respect those parents, those families, and those communities that deal with what God has given them. I'm looking at this young man that I do not know to my left, and I have